Okay, Clean Energy Capital. You have a new name, Xela Energy, and I guess the first question is why the name change?
So yeah, Clean Energy Capital. Fundamentally, I think a lot of people found their businesses worry about the name rather than actually getting on with implementing the business itself. And so I wanted to call it something that did what it said on the tin. Technology agnostic, delivering solutions to customers in a land-led approach. And I'll come on to what that means in a minute. But fundamentally, wanting to give landowners the idea of a well-capitalized business, effectively representing as a fund. Effectively, we went out, we raised £5 million of seed capital from high net worths. We founded the business. We actually went out for 3, but we were oversubscribed off the back of the idea, which was fantastic. And yeah, went out to the market, and the name very much served sort of a purpose in speaking with these large, big, either gendered landowners, or generational landowners, farmers, things like that. Moving into where we are now as an organisation, we achieve what very, very few businesses do. I think it's sort of less than 1% that found their businesses go on to achieving institutional fundraise. And last year, we did what we set out to achieve. We set out to raise over 100 million in funding, and we achieved that goal. And we actually exceeded that goal. I won't go into the details of the figure itself, but we are significantly backed by True Green Capital Management, a US fund that are specialized in private wire renewables. And in doing so, I think echoed a new era of the business. And what we do is we represent ourselves to very, very large blue chip corporates, the hyperscalers, your Microsoft, Amazon, Google, massive data centers out there. And we also deal with other large power users, your pharma industries, your AstraZeneca's, GSK's, things like that as well. And then, of course, the other big projects, one of which I'll be able to name shortly, which is IBM, which is obviously a data center that's just come out of planning. And so in speaking to these very, very large corporates, what we wanted to ensure is that, they never saw us as a sort of competitor or funder in that regard. We're not building data centers ourselves. And what we actually are is an energy company. Okay. And so the rebrand was really about that transition into the representation of the business as an energy company, but specifically a new phrase that we've coined, which is EIPP. So you may have heard of IPP, which is independent power producer, which do big solar, wind farms, sell power into the grid as an independent power producer, sort of lots of mini power stations. We're that, but for enterprise. So we are building enterprise independent power stations as an independent power producer. So we're an EIPP. And we've grown into that organization. And that's really the why behind Xela Energy, and the sort of the story behind why and how we've got here and why it's relevant for the name change.
Okay, yeah, and in terms of that journey, I mean, it'd just be good to understand, I suppose, what have you had to do from the idea to getting it to where you are today? Has it been? I mean, it sounds like the fundraising has gone fairly well, which is obviously quite an important thing. But in terms of getting everything else in place to where you are today, has that been an equally smooth journey, or how? Yeah,
I don't think any startup is a smooth journey, right? Yeah, all startups. This is my third venture. Nothing's ever easy. If it was, everyone would do it. Is probably the way I'll phrase it. Raising seed capital is something I've done before, but getting oversubscribed through high net worth raise at the beginning of the business was a huge achievement, and I think it stands to the team that I managed to get together and put together. We've got a great COO, Sam Dye. We've got a great CFO, Matt Williams. Matt Williams, for example, was at Falck and Blue Energy beforehand, doing 300 megawatts of onshore wind in the UK. So we've got a very, very experienced team, and we're able to have great success off the back of that. It's really about the people, and having good talent and good people within a business instills that trust into your investors. It's been incredibly difficult. It's nothing's ever smooth sailing, and things come out the periphery that you don't necessarily anticipate. But the biggest challenge, I think, and I'd say one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life was the institutional fundraise. I've raised capital before, sort of 50 to 75 million pounds. I've sold businesses. I've been through difficult personal times, but hands down, the DD process, the process you go through, it takes a year of being on your absolute A game, keeping a business going, right, doing your business as usual, at the same time of raising, serious money, and every single question requires a 3,000 word answer, and so it does get to a point where you go, no, you've asked enough questions, invest, and you have to, call the bluff. Are you guys investing or not? Which is a very, very difficult thing to do, because obviously if it fails, then you've got to go back to the drawing board, and obviously keep the lights on of the business. So it was an incredible journey, and then having the support of True Green Capital now within the business, and the value that they bring, not just financially, but also the knowledge they bring from doing hundreds of megawatts of private wire in the US, really bring a lot of added value, not just capital. It's the journey is never easy, and it continues to be one of the most exciting things I've ever done.
Okay, so in terms of how you engage with the customers, you mentioned obviously they're big data centers, big power users, but from sort of initial contact to delivery of renewable assets, and I mean, do you deliver them, then walk away, or do you potentially run them on go? The business model, I guess, for how it all fits together.
Sure. I mean, one of the USP when I founded Clean Energy Capital, now Xela Energy, is that we take a very, very different approach to everyone else in the market. We haven't come across anyone else in the market, even to date, 4.5, 5 years later, that's doing development in the same way that we do it. And what I mean by that is we take a proactive land-led approach in the way that we do our development. We're very sort of proactive in nature. And I'll go on to that in a bit more detail in a second. But everyone else in the market takes a sort of consultative approach. Let's take Microsoft as an example. Microsoft, isn't renewable energy a good idea? Can we help you with your renewables and doing something? Well, they go, well, yeah, great. Get in line with every other person that's trying to sell us some renewables in some way, shape, or form, and we'll get to you when we feel like it, because we're focused on building more data centers. Fair enough. What we do is something very, very different. We would, using this example, scope out all their data centers, where they are, where they're located, and we will go and secure a land position. So even before we knock on their door, I know they need renewables. I know they need as much power as they can possibly get. They've got their ESG reporting. They've got to go green. And not only that, we can deliver energy security at a cheaper price. So we actually do a guaranteed discount to their all-in delivered grid price. So we will give them a guaranteed saving, 100%, on fairly good long-term contracts, sort of 10, 15 years or so, to tie it into the time of their lifespan of their data centers. Most data centers tend to have 15-year leases or so. And then we will come to them with a solution. So we knock on their door and say, we've already got a piece of land under option. We're putting it into planning. We're developing it ourselves. It's 50 megawatts, so it's utility scale. But we'll plug it straight into your premises. We won't go via the grid. So we're able to avoid a lot of the non-commodity costs in delivering that power directly to those customers. And then it's true green solution. It's an actual deep green rather than bio-certifications or anything like that via the grid. You can actually count the electron that goes from your solar farm, your wind farm, your battery, because we are technology agnostic as a company, and you can count them as they go directly into the customer's premises. So we are a land-led business, and what we do is we deliver solutions to our customers. Okay, so we'll come to them not with a problem, but we'll come to them, we are actually building this, do you want it? And often what you find is in these hubs, data center hubs, you don't just get a Microsoft. Next door, you'll get the other hyperscalers. You'll get the Googles, the Amazons, the Metas, whoever it might be, right next door. And you go, okay, if you don't want it, Amazon or Microsoft, your next door neighbor, Google or Meta, they do want it. So, and we've got the only land secured to deliver a viable scheme. So who wants it? So it gives them that call to action. It gives them that necessity to get on with it and stop dwelling on, oh, do we do this? Do we do that? No, we're building this. We've got the only land to develop it. And as per your question, we develop, build, own, and operate the entire lifespan of the asset. Okay, so we're looking for the long-term hold to give our customers that energy security that they're after. They don't need to invest. So all our customers get is a cheap, sustainable power supply from a renewable source, and it tends to supply them with about 30% of their power at their data center. Obviously, with solar, you only get it when the sun shines. But what we've found is, specifically for data centers, especially with global warming, with our summers, as you can see this summer, very, very warm, right? The grid is under huge strain and really struggling to keep up with the demand that data centers have, the cooling demands that they have from energy. Additional solar delivering directly connected into those assets is actually increasing their blue line. It's increasing the amount that of rack space they can have, because we're able to provide them that peak load during when they need it the most, during the warm summers. So it ties in really, really well with our customer base.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, before we move on slightly, in terms of, you say obviously you're wanting to own and operate longer term, but is there any thought at some stage, because I know in the data center industry there's some suggestion that microgrids will be developed and then at some stage they will be adopted or handed over to the national infrastructure, because that helps both parties, if you like. But is that a long-term plan at all, or as far as you're concerned, you will just build, own, operate energy infrastructure, and that's it?
It's a great question. I mean, look, we're looking to we've got capital to deploy. North, as I said, north of the 100 million. We will be building, owning, operating those assets for life. We'll be bringing in debt, so that will go a very long way. And then, of course, True Green are expanding out Fund 5 as we speak, and are very much looking to us to hopefully deploy additional capital to the original that they've already confirmed for funding the business. So we've got deep pockets. We are in the UK right now. It is our ambition to go global, right? We've got a great champion project, the IBM Hursley site at their HQ. It's a 5 megawatt private wire directly into their site. And that was, again, proactive land development. We found land, we could deliver a viable project to them at scale. And so that's what we're able to do. So that project really is quite a special one. We've also, I can't say who it is just yet, but a very, very big name in the pharma sector for sort of double the size of that, so sort of 11 megawatts or so of private wire into the pharma sector. And we've got quite a lot of other customers, again, moving through contract. They're currently under contract, but exclusivity and under strict NDAs sort of north of 150 megawatts there. So there's a lot moving through that development cycle. We've got about a 4.5 to 5 gig pipeline. I don't like talking bragawatts, but that is qualified pipeline where we've analysed the customer's half-hourly data, understand their demand profile, and we've got north of 600 megawatts under exclusive contract right now that we're in detailed negotiations with. So, yeah, it's very, very exciting times.
Yeah, and in terms of the whole sort of supply chain, how much of it is your thing, and how much are you using? I guess you've built up some collaborative partners, etc., to deliver. So have you got some key partners you're working with, as opposed to just using local resources wherever? Or what's your approach, if you like, to that process?
So from a land perspective, we do a lot of our own in-house land development. We've got a number of large organisations, like Savills, engage with us doing land sourcing. We've got some amazing CRM technology that we use, sort of a Google Earth XXL that is enabling us to see land reg details, grid capabilities in the local area, what the constraints are. And we've got a great land sourcing team of 6 persons internally. Dealing with the customer side, we don't actually tend to use agents at all. We've built a very successful in-house commercial team. Unlike a corporate PPA, which is extremely commoditized, this is not a commoditized sell. This is a top-down sell. This is what are you paying right now? We're actually got a site right next to you. Do you want the power? We can deliver it, and we can be guaranteed cheaper than your all-in delivered price because of that non-commodity avoidance. And so, yeah, the in-house commercial team, we've really found experts in their respective fields. So our commercial director responsible for delivering data centers, Amy Young, she actually came from a data center background, understands how they work, understands the lifespans, the tenures, the different type of tenants, colos, owner-occupied, hyperscalers, all those different types of enterprise data centers as well, all those different types of data centers. She really understands our customer base, and I think that's the most important thing when it comes to it. This is an enterprise sale. How do you go and speak to the CEO of a Google or an Amazon for Europe, right? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a 15 to 20-year long-term commitment to a specific site for £100 million contract. So having that internal resource, that internal enterprise sales capability that you can trust in is very, very difficult to find, and I don't think we'll trust externals to deliver that. We have some sources for bringing in those types of deals, but generally speaking, all our deals are self-generated. And then we have Alex Witt, whose background is from renewable space. He was at Conrad before joining us, and he's executed the Leonardo helicopters private wire PPA, for example. So there's some, we've got some real talent within the business that understand both our customer base and the product that we are selling specifically. And it's those two things together, they make a really great team on entering our customer base.
Okay, and in terms of it's still, I suppose, relatively early days, but what bearing in mind, you said earlier, I think you want to take it global and that opportunity. What's the sort of overall impact you would like to have when it comes to delivering a renewable energy infrastructure for, obviously data centers in particular, but major power users? What's the vision, if you like?
Yeah, when I founded the business, I was looking at what mantra to have behind it, and what goal, what do we want to achieve as an organisation? And it all came down to, do I take a quote from Sir Isaac Newton or someone like this? And I thought, actually, I'd rather come up with something myself. to drive the business forward. And what I came up with was, if our energy is unsustainable, so is our existence. And to me, that really is what this is all about. Yes, of course, I want to make sure that we have a successful, profitable business, repay our investors, our shareholders, and drive that value. But fundamentally, I want to be able to turn the largest users of power globally, which is cloud data, and it certainly will be in the future, and really drive them into the renewable world. And we can do that without having government support, without having financial penalties. And I think that's, solar is now globally the cheapest form of energy, full stop, per kilowatt. That's it, right? And then you've got wind shortly behind. But oil and gas is way out there, and oil and gas still requires huge subsidization by governments. And when you look at it, wind and solar does not require that level of subsidization anymore. You look at the US, they're bringing down the tariffs and the tax credits. In the UK, there are no more feed-in tariffs or renewable schemes in place. And so I think that speaks volumes. So if we are able to deliver large-scale renewables, right, which we can already do, right, we are delivering them to these very, very large users of power, we can help them transition into the green revolution, but also it gives them energy security. You look at grid, you look at the routes that these organizations are currently getting their power, and it's not the most stable right now. The government has talked about brownouts. We had a recent brownout in London, right, a couple of months ago. You look at all of the south of Europe, had a huge power issue very, very recently. And I think the issue there is the archaic infrastructure. It's built in the 1970s, 80s, all these overhead power lines. And the infrastructure there, it just wasn't built for the level of power demand, that we're now requiring. And that demand is just going to go up and up and up. No matter how more efficient we become, we'll still need more and more and more and more data. Energy requirements of humanity is going one way, and that's up. And so if we can help transition away from fossil fuels and towards renewables, and help the largest power consumers in the world go green, genuinely, truly green, via private wire, directly connected into their infrastructure, then I fundamentally see that as a great thing. So yeah, that's how I came up with the mantra of, if our energy is unsustainable, so is our existence. And everyone in the company is really sort of believes deeply in that mantra.
Okay, so in terms of the roadmap, you're as you say, you've got the IBM site and the other one you mentioned. How, I guess it's always the problem with startups, isn't it? You desperately want to do loads, but you've got to do it in a sort of controlled fashion, shall we say? So over what sort of time frame do you think you will achieve your sort of true global status, if you like, and get to where you want to be, if that makes sense?
So I think once our UK projects, a couple of them are operational, we're then looking to expand, but our customer base are already calling for it. So we'll see. There are places in the world which are, unfortunately, due to the legislative positions, currently make it so that the only entity that can supply power is a government-regulated utility, or is the state utility. So you'll see maybe things like Ireland have just come out with the ability to do private wire, for example, to run your own cables and infrastructure. So that was released last week. That's hot off the press. And so we're looking into, right, does that mean that we can actually do our business there? Or are they going to make it difficult? What's the premise of that? Because, of course, in Ireland, every data center wants power and they want it yesterday. But the national infrastructure just can't meet their requirements. So we're really looking at Europe, US, in hopefully fairly short order in the next couple of years. So that gives you a bit of time frame over when we're going to be doing that.
Okay, and I have to ask. I mean, we sort of
Sure.
go into the realms of politics, but clearly there has been since I guess a certain person assumed power at the other side of the Atlantic. I mean, not just him, but other. I don't think anyone's denying climate change, but there's certainly pushback as to the impact it has on, shall we say, how people do or don't make their money, and there's been an element of pushback against a lot of the what previously assumed direction of travel, I guess. Are you confident that what you're talking about is sort of here to stay, or do you worry at all that this sort of pushback will grow in momentum and sort of fossil fuels will make a, if not a comeback, a resurgence, and sort of renewables will dwindle in sort of influence for a while, or just yeah, any thoughts you might have as to how you see that or landscape evolve?
Hmm. It's an interesting question there. Look, I've always been a great advocate of you can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. Okay, and Trump is great at having, as one example of having his opinions that are then he makes them fact. Sorry, that's not a possibility. Um, Climate change is a fact. The climate is changing. Um, the release of fossil fuels has accelerated that change without a doubt. This is all scientifically proven fact. And so we have to do something, okay? And it's the funny thing is, I always sort of ask the question, well, why? Because the world doesn't care. The world goes and changes climate all the time. Before humanity even existed, the world changed climate. The only reason we should care is for our own existence, right? The only reason we care about climate change is, well, if we have a drought this summer, we won't have enough crops to feed ourselves. So the only entities losing out really is humanity. So we're kind of cutting our noses by our own face if we actually decide to go against renewables. So I find that a bit of an odd mantra, some odd theory someone wants to push, because the only people really losing out are yourselves and your children. The other element is the really undeniable fact that if it's cheaper, it's irrelevant. So park all the renewable politics, park, is it a good idea from a political standpoint, park all of that and say, well, why are these organisations wanting to do it? Fundamentally, they've got their bottom line, right? All these big organisations, they've got their ESG targets, but more important is their bottom line, because they report to their shareholders and their investors. That's a fact. And so if we are able to help them on their bottom line and make these organisations more profitable by giving them cleaner, cheaper energy security, well, it's a no-brainer. The renewables is a nice to have. So I think really those two reasons, I think that the main driver for all of these organisations, so far as we have seen, has always been bottom line. No matter what their reports and ESG and have all said, oh yeah, it's good, but oh, is it a hassle? I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a bit difficult. The real driver has been, oh, but it's cheaper. All right, we'll do that then, and then we'll have the nice green tick in the box. But make no mistake, it always has been and always will be. If you can make an economic case for something, why wouldn't you do it? So that's what we've done. We've made it a no-brainer, right? Renewables does not require subsidy. So as long as you do not proactively move against renewables with things like tariffs and things like that to, like I said, cut your nose and spite your face, then you're in a very good position, because we've suddenly got locally produced, locally sourced energy security, which we need, rather than just relying on single point of failures with big power stations, which obviously from an energy security perspective is quite a dangerous place to be in. If you have multiple sites around energy production, whether it's wind, solar, with batteries to level out the grid, then you're in a much better place. And I think that's also where things like SMRs are coming into play in the future. If you can have multiple SMRs and not relying on single point of failure, large centralized power stations, but distributed generation, you're then leaving your infrastructure a lot less vulnerable from an energy security standpoint. So price number one, energy security number two, and sustainability is an inevitability, because if it's the cheapest and most energy secure thing to procure, well, why wouldn't you do it? Hopefully that's not too of a long-winded answer.
No. And I'm just going to make, I mean, obviously you have a great opportunity to deal with, a business and explain all that, etc. And this is slightly, I guess, at a tangent, but if you're happy, do you think more generally governments, whether ours or others, should be explaining or making the case better? Because generally, because of the price of energy which is going up, despite all the renewable investment, people are able to sort of muddy the waters and claim that renewables are expensive or whatever, when as you say, if you drill down, you do actually understand what's going on. And I know the way the pricing goes is fairly shall we say, inflexible, so that that causes problems as well. Do you think there is a need for more clarity and better explanation of how the energy market works, as opposed to kind of the lack of transparency, and therefore everyone who wants to can kind of push a particular point of view that may not be backed up by the facts?
Yeah, I think you're spot on in what you're saying. I think energy and energy procurement is very opaque. I'm an industry expert that's been doing this for 15 years, and I just about understand all of the intricacies of it, but fundamentally the non-commodity part of the bill is made up of huge subsidizations for oil and gas, for things like that, for legacy wind and solar and things like that, to start an industry did get governmental support, but now no longer requires it, because it is self-sustaining and self-sufficient at an economically sustainable long-term price. The other thing as well is energy security is a lot more important than people think. You look at the instability that the war in Ukraine caused when energy prices spiked a couple of years ago, and you look at the instability in the Middle East right now, that hugely impacts. Oil and gas prices go through the roof. All of a sudden, even you and me as homeowners, suddenly find huge increase in our energy bills. And poor people in a difficult position. The poor people in a difficult position, where they are unable to afford their energy, I think give them very little resilience for that. And I think being able to help individuals in difficult situations where their energy prices are moving up and down with oil and gas prices, if we are able to generate our own power in the UK without having reliance on external influences quite as much, with long-term stability that wind and solar does in fact give you, you then have long-term visibility as to pricing, and therefore you have a lot less of this yo-yoing of energy pricing. And one thing I have noticed, which is when energy prices spike up, they very rarely come back down. Even though the actual costs have come down, what you and I pay at home very rarely goes down, because they think once you're used to paying it, well, you're used to paying it now, aren't you? I've never seen oil and gas price at the pump, at the fuel pumps. I mean, never really see them go down, do you? Because once people get used to paying something, some sort of new tariff gets chucked on. So I think having that additional energy security will ensure that the people in the most vulnerable situations are given that level of long-term visibility. And like you said, that opaqueness is a real problem. So any way that we can give the people in those difficult situations long-term visibility and an education on energy and infrastructure, I think that would be a good thing. But it's very complex, which makes it difficult.
And maybe just finally, because I've taken up a lot of your time, in terms of the data center industry, do you think what you're doing is also, I mean, clearly there are many benefits, but the industry has a fairly bad reputation as a power hungry, if not polluting, not not very sustainable. And with AI coming online, that's only going to get, I can't remember, it might be consuming, is it 6 or 7% of the world's total electricity, so that from 2 or 3% at the moment. And do you think it's good for them that they can therefore develop their own resources? Obviously, they get the resilience, etc., but also they can therefore, if the local town is saying, well, this data center is doing that, they can turn around, well, actually, no, because we've got, Xela Energy built us this. It's got nothing to do with the grid, so kind of leave us alone. Obviously, they wouldn't be quite so abrupt, but do you think it's good for them to be able to use folks like yourself to show that they are, trying to be good citizens when it comes to sort of overall power infrastructure and consumption, etc.?
Yeah, that's what we found so far, interestingly. So the first planning application we put in Hursley, next to IBM, that project genuinely went into planning. All the locals were, very, very happy with the project because it's a great local employer, it employs a lot of people locally, and you're making a genuine impact to a local consumer of significant power. And so anywhere we can do that, we've got land positions in Newport, for example, where we can do a 50 megawatt solar farm to the sort of the Vantage our Microsoft hub, right? We could do that. We can start that project tomorrow. But it's trying to find the right people in these organizations is quite tricky to make those decisions in those organizations. But yeah, the feedback from a planning perspective has been extremely positive, because if we can reduce that demand from the grid, especially during peak times, when people are going to want to turn on their air conditioning, when these very big data centers are going to use a lot of power during the summer for the additional cooling, that's really where this comes into play. Like I said, we're also looking at wind, and in the future we'll probably look at SMRs as well. So there are real benefits to not having this huge demand from these data centers to the grid.
Okay, I mean, as I say, I've taken a lot of your time, and we've gone in various different directions, but I've enjoyed. I hope you have. Thanks
Yeah,
so much for
absolutely.
sharing the Xela sort of journey and thoughts more generally on energy and data centers, etc. So, Alex, appreciate your time so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Phil. Much appreciated. Thanks, Philip.